All right, let's get started. So once again, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar. We're giving you a behind the scenes case study with Temple Rodef Shalom. I'm Kate Jaeger-Thomas, the Consulting Services Director at the Heller Fundraising Group, and we're here today to talk about Temple Rodef Shalom's transformational campaign, and you'll be hearing from our wonderful founder, Peter Heller, who served as strategic advisor to Temple Rodef Shalom throughout the duration of their campaign, and the fantastic Hannah Moore, the director of philanthropy at Temple Rodef Shalom. Welcome, both of you.
Thank
Hello,
you.
hello.
So before we get into the discussion and we can move to the next slide, I wanted to share the story of when I first met Hannah, which was shortly after I started working at Heller Group almost 3 years ago. She gave me a tour of Temple Rodef Shalom and showed me all of the gorgeous changes to their building that came out of their capital campaign. Here's a picture of us in front of their really beautiful donor wall, which we're going to talk about later on today. Then we had lunch and got to chatting about the campaign, and I asked her what did she learn from it and from working with the Heller Group. Now, I will never forget her answer, and I reference it often in conversations. And I'm going to let her share it with you later on today. But in short, her answer really illustrates the truly transformative power of a campaign. A great campaign can not only transform your facilities and your physical spaces, but ultimately it can also transform your organizations. And we'll hear from Hannah about what that meant for TRS. I also want to acknowledge what I consider to be the specialness of our relationship with Hannah and Temple Rodef Shalom. You know, we were having lunch and getting to know each other years after their campaign ended. And in my past roles, I've certainly worked with fundraising consultants and other kinds of consultants. And while they've all been lovely people and we had great working relationships, I'm not having lunch with them years later. So the connection between the Heller Group and Hannah and TRS is incredibly strong. She's a regular at our solicitors working group. And whenever we hire a new employee, we make sure to introduce them to Hannah. She's a mainstay in our community. And I think that speaks volumes to the partnerships we aim to form with all of our clients. So Hannah, once again, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
So let's dive in. We can move to the next slide. To set the scene, Temple Rodef Shalom needed to raise $16 million to add 15,000 square feet of space to accommodate its growing membership, which today is 800 families. Um,
1800.
1,800, I'm sorry. Thank you so
And
much. 1,800 families.
actually, as of last night, 1818 families.
1818, amazing.
Very lucky number.
That
Very
is
lucky number.
indeed. But when you came to us, you were telling us the story about the temple's prior campaign had only raised $9.6 million. That was less than half of your $20 million goal at the time. So when we launched our planning study, TRS had already raised $1 million from one single donor, but you all were feeling trepidatious. Lay leaders and members expressed a lack of confidence in your ability to really meet this full $16 million goal. So we can move to the next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, the campaign did have transformational impact for Temple Rodef Shalom. In addition, there were some key insights and key strategies that we had in place. Our strategy required a pretty significant shift in messaging, both in style and in approach. We worked closely with your senior rabbi, Amy Schwartzman, to write a case for support that really anchored the campaign in a positive message about the future of Judaism. We also looked for opportunities to engage smaller cohorts in conversation about the clergy's vision and build community around the project. And we implemented other outreach strategies, such as that beautiful donor wall, and you also employed a text and phone banking effort. All of these things we're going to talk about today. Of course, the campaign was not without challenges, though you all showed tremendous adaptability and resilience throughout it. Located in the suburbs of DC, many of TRS's Fed worker base was impacted by the government shutdown at that time. And while the strategy needed to shift, they really did not let it impact the overall success of the campaign. So moving to the next slide, the excellent news that they exceeded their goal and raised from a majority of your membership base, which was 1,600 at the time, and raised over $16.1 million. And you can see why we love sharing the story of Temple Rodef Shalom. I mean, this is such a fantastic photo and really shows the spirit of your community. So let's hear from Peter and Hannah. Really, you two know how this all went inside and out. So I just want to ask our listeners, while we're talking, if any questions come up, please post them to the thread and we'll answer them during the Q&A at the end. There's a little question feature. Pop your questions in there. So we're going to start at the very beginning. Hannah, Peter, take us back to those first moments. Hannah, what was happening for Temple Rodef Shalom in those pre-campaign days when you reached out to Heller Fundraising Group? And Peter, I'm going to follow up with some questions about the study that we completed for them when we began our work together. So, Hannah.
Well, hello, everybody. I think that, this was actually the first campaign I'd ever done. I had started my job here just about a year and a half, 2 years before the minute I got here, I kind of knew that we were going to have to do something. I was thinking, maybe $500,000 or $1 million. And then quickly, once we started to sort of examine where we were at and start talking about our dreams, which is what you have to think about, we realized it was going to be a lot more. And but we had such a, we had managed to raise that $9 million, 16 years earlier. But we'd had to cut out things that people thought were important, and we really had to scramble near the end to achieve. And of course, we also then ended up also with a mortgage. So people weren't unhappy with that, but they just said, we're not a congregation that can really raise a lot of money. So we should be modest in our attempts. And yet we knew from looking at the project what we wanted to put some of those things back in. And also, we were a much larger congregation than we had been 16 years before. And we needed to build out our space and improve what we had. And that meant a big campaign. And so we had to figure out, how are we going to do this? How much can we do? Can we do what we hope to? And that's when we started looking to find someone to work with. And we found Peter.
Amazing.
Well, by the way, I learned just when Kate introduced me that I'm wonderful. So that was the right
Yeah.
that was the right decision to make.
It's true.
I just Kate, before you ask anything, I just want to add that Hannah said something really important, which is that something about the campaign being based on a dream, and at the same time, the dream needs to be based on real needs. And it wasn't like they were sitting around going, oh, gee, like, what should we raise some money for now? They had real physical plant needs that needed addressing because they were growing and the space wasn't working that well. And even parking needed to be addressed, which is often something when you're redoing space, for a building. And so the $16 million added up to the real things that had to be done. And the good news was that through the study, we actually learned that if the campaign was carried out effectively, they could most likely actually raise that. It wasn't, we have these real needs and we have capacity for much, much less. We believed that there was hopefully that level of capacity out there.
Sure. And one of the things I will say is that I said, for 2 years, I said, I am not raising money for a parking lot. I don't raise money for cars. And of course, we had to raise money for cars because that's how people come. We live in the suburbs. So anyway, at least we did something else besides a parking lot.
Yeah. I mean, well, Peter, you were just saying that we had to complete the study with Temple Rodef Shalom before we went into the campaign. I'm curious to hear from your perspective. What did you know at that point needed to happen in order for their campaign to be successful after we completed the study?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to just say a few things. The first is one of the reasons we keep talking with Hannah and keep a relationship with her is that during the campaign, she was like a poster child client. She was an amazing client. So
Hmm.
one of the things she did when before we started the study was she said, we're doing this campaign at some level. So we're not calling this a feasibility study. This is going to be called a planning study because we know we're doing something. So the study lined things up so that we could figure out the reality of how to go about this campaign. And two things. One is that initially we tested the $16 million building project need plus $3 million for an endowment. And we found out that A, people weren't really that excited about giving to an endowment at that particular time. They already had I think about $3 million in endowed funds, and they weren't excited about adding to it. But more importantly than that, we felt it was going to be a stretch, not impossible, but a stretch to get to the $16 million without that. So we came back and recommended instead of $19 million that you focus on 16 specifically um, for the building project.
So before we go on to my next question, there was a clarifying question in the chat asking what study. So I just wanted to give a bit of a overview. Oftentimes, when we begin working with a client who is um, considering, or in the case of Temple Rodef Shalom, knowing that they need to engage in a major campaign, whether it be capital or endowment or otherwise, we complete and advise the completion of what is often referred to as a feasibility study. In this case, it was a planning study. Often they are, one and the same. That allows us to really help our client partners understand what is possible for their community, do an assessment of their of your donor base, and help lay the groundwork for the campaign to come. So it's a critical and important part of, any campaign process, and that's what we started with at Temple Rodef Shalom before moving on to it.
And I just want to say it's a two-way street. This is why this is so important. And there are always people think, well, can't we just skip this step?
Right.
And the reason you can't skip this step, although some people also just want to do a planning study and then not hire anybody to help them with the campaign, I would say that's also not a great idea, is that the planning study or the feasibility study is a first look for the donors at what you're planning and plotting and hoping for. And the study is testing the case, checking in with these donors as to how they feel about the institution, how do they feel about the goals, and sharing with them how important this could be for their community. So it's not usually done by the institution itself, because you're looking for someone that you want someone that these people can give perhaps a more honest or even doubtful answer to, because they want to tell you what you want to hear. They want to tell the rabbi what they want to hear. But in this case, we wanted to hear and know what we were going to be facing when we had to. So it is an important part, and it may not always turn out that what people say they would give or wouldn't give is what they're going to do, but it gives you some indication overall.
Absolutely. And it really lays out the plan. We aim to give you, lay out the plan for the next the duration of the campaign. And there's always, I find in the studies, there's always things that we didn't anticipate that came up, and we also know that how we think it's going to happen is only one way that it could possibly happen. So you all raised $16 million But it didn't quite happen, as always, the way you thought it would. Can you tell us about some of your key donor stories, including your leadership gifts? How did those come to be?
Well, I will say two things. One is whom we first thought was going to be likely our largest gift turned out not to be. We had a kind of a misunderstanding about what money they had access to, and their own money was not the same as perhaps some larger foundation money that they were on, but it wasn't money that we could access. So it took a little while to discover that was going to be the case. But another gift that we knew could be a large gift and would be a large gift took much longer to come to fruition. And we didn't give up. And we didn't, when they said we're not prepared to decide how much yet, took much longer than we thought. And I would say to someone, if it takes 18 months to get your lead gift, it takes 18 months to get your lead gift. And in the end, and they increased their gift, and it turned out to be the backbone and inspired others to give large as well. Although they gave first, the other people, they increased their gifts as they saw that we were really closing in on our goal and that additional stuff at the end could make a difference. So you just have to persevere. If you're not getting a hard rejection of where you are at, just keep going and keep up the knowledge and the information and keep telling them what you're doing and what success you're having, and let them come to their conclusion in time for you to use the gift, one hopes.
Yeah. Maybe I can fill in a few details from the consultant's perspective on that. So, Hannah, if I remember correctly, I think you had at least four, if not five, seven-figure gifts in the campaign, which was really great. And I think also really required for the success of this campaign. And in fact, in our study, and just going back for a second for the whoever asked the question about the study, it's a thing that usually takes about 5 months before we then dive into the campaign. But during the study period, we concluded that they would be successful if they got a handful of these very large gifts, and otherwise it was going to be really challenging. And in fact, we proposed that they needed and we knew the families that were by and large capable for this. So that part wasn't a surprise in this particular campaign. And we proposed that they needed a $5 million gift at the highest level. And in fact, this family that did end up making the largest gift, and it took a long time, as Hannah was saying, they ended up giving $3 million. Now, that's amazing, right? Okay, a $3 million gift. I don't care the size of the campaign, or if you're, doing a $500 million campaign, whatever. $3 million is still a really big gift. And first of all, it was really delayed compared to what we were hoping for. So we had to keep figuring out, how to do other strategies along the way. What we were going to do if that didn't come in, or if it came in lower. We knew there was going to be something. And also, because it didn't come in at $5 million, we really had to push to get to that $16 million level through other means. And luckily, they slightly exceeded it.
Can I ask us to put a finer point on the delay here? Because I think it's such an important um, question that a lot of donors, or I'm sorry, organizations that we work with have around, when are our largest gifts going to come in? And there's the assumption that they're the first ones in. And that is often where we hope what we hope will be the case. Hannah, do you remember, like, within the campaign, you mentioned 18 months to get to your lead donor. Within the campaign, which was a 3-year campaign, when did your largest gift come in? Do you remember?
I'm thinking that the promise of that gift came in time for, there's the quiet part of your campaign when you're hoping to raise most of these large gifts, and that you're not really talking to others. And they came in, I believe, at the very end of the quiet period with a number. And that meant that when we launched, we were at close to half of our goal.
Great.
Just shy of $8 million. And for me, I know some other campaigns people want to, it's good if you have 2/3 or something. For me, getting to half was like, wow, we can launch with this. And the reason, partly, I think they were delaying. I know the reason they were delaying their decision had to do with the mechanics of where their money was going to come from, which was the sale of a partly privately held company. Yeah. And so that they didn't know the value. I think they could have promised the gift before that, but they're very cautious and thoughtful people. And so that is why we managed to squeak in to be able for our launch, which we weren't going to hold up on and keep going because we had to get going. So that is why. And it really gave a boost of confidence to have acquired half of it. And then I think it seemed doable to the rest of the congregation.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate you letting me dive a little bit deeper into the minutia of it. So let's talk about some of the strategies that you did employ. Peter, you mentioned really needing to shift around as some of these larger gifts. So what were some of the strategies that were implemented that were most effective?
Do you want me to answer? Do you want Peter?
Go ahead if something comes to mind.
Hannah, will you start with, what I loved hearing about was the gatherings you all brought together.
The gatherings were, they were part of the transformative aspect for our community. We knew we needed to have opportunities to be with people in community, to talk about our goal, our ultimate goal, which was a home for the future of Judaism. Money is just a means to achieve some other goal. And since we had spent so much time and thinking about what is that, what does it look like to be a home for the future of Judaism, we gathered in what I would think of as like zip code afternoon gatherings. You could think of it as zip code coffees, only we also offered wine. But to gather with our senior clergy, to share stories. We when the gathering wasn't super large, where people we asked them to share something if they wanted to about a meaningful moment in our community for them, a meaningful moment that they experienced, something that really touched them that they will remember, either personally or as a family, and to share that. And of course, our senior rabbi and clergy shared what was meaningful to them about being part of this community and what the vision was moving forward. This was not a hard ask. This was, will you join me in this effort? But no pledges, no raising your hand. I'm going to give you $5,000 or whatever. It was really a coming together of community so they could see what it was that they would be investing in. And we, each one of these took a slightly different tone depending on who was there. And we are always in someone's home in that area. And it's amazing because we're a growing and large congregation. Sometimes people would meet someone and say, someone would say, I live 5 blocks away. Oh my God, I didn't know you lived 5 blocks away. So it's a real opportunity to create community, for them to see community and to be in a room with with the people who are important to the growth and happiness of the community. And each of those, and then of course we followed up with that later on with opportunities, but it was really a feel-good opportunity and a chance for people to see what kind of community they were a member of.
Beautiful.
One important little secret about doing those types of events well is whether you're a synagogue or any other sort of nonprofit is if there's an opportunity for people in the room to share their experience. And if it's a large group, you can just say, hey, let's pick 5 people to share their experience because we don't have enough time for everybody. You want to make sure that they don't give a chronological list of the amount of time they've been involved in your synagogue or your organization or the event they went. You want to have a question for them to answer that comes from the heart. It's like, what's important to you about your relationship with this organization, or why does this food bank matter to you, or why does this whatever matter to you? And because then you get something really visceral and exciting, and not just, I came the first time when blah blah blah. And it's a subtle but important difference, and it's part of what the campaign in a lot of ways is an excuse to bring people together to make the community stronger after you have the money to build the thing that then gives you more space in the buildings.
It should be a gathering at which there are some tears, lots of laughter and some tears, for us anyway, and some people remembering a moment, and they might cry, and then that would make our senior rabbi cry because she cried, and then some other people would cry, and then lots of laughter too about funny things that happen. But it is an emotional and connecting moment, and that was really great.
I want to talk a bit about your donor wall, but before we do that, Peter and Hannah, I'd really love to hear, your perspective on having clergy be an integral part of the campaign. I know that we have people, organizations, all different kinds of organizations, but we also have a lot of faith-based organizations listening in today. And that's a question that comes up. What is the role of the clergy in a campaign, or, a similar leader in your community? Peter, can you speak to that from your
Yeah,
perspective?
so I'm going to give the perspective as the consultant and the
Yes.
outsider, and then Hannah will tell it like it actually is. So, uh, in our view, and we've seen this again and again with the synagogues we worked with, and we then translate that really to other organizations with working closely with the executive director. It's like, what is your vision as the leader, and for synagogue in a lot of ways the spiritual leader of this organization, this community congregation? What is your vision for the future of your community? And every synagogue is going to have a slightly, it's all going to be within the same realm of, because they're all synagogues, but slightly different because of the personality of the rabbi, the personality of the congregation, their location, what their needs are. But helping them tap into that, and I use the word helping, uh, specifically because any executive director or rabbi is all day long, they're dealing with the reality of whatever is facing them. They're not sitting around, waxing poetic on what is the future of our community. So our role is to really help them um, voice that, and in a way that's going to be powerful for the community. And then that really connects to the document that we help every campaign with, which is the case for support that comes through. And in this case, Rabbi Schwartzman and us came together with this idea for a home for the future of Judaism. And then if you look at the case for support, it talks about the pieces of what that home are about. And it's not just like we need to raise money for a home. No, it's like we have all these specific pillars. The other really exciting thing about working with Rabbi Schwartzman and Hannah is that at the beginning, Hannah, as I'm sure you remember well, Rabbi Schwartzman was like, I don't want to really be involved in the asking for the money thing. And in fact, she and Hannah went on a lot of solicitations. She never actually asked for the money. Hannah did the asking. It was fine. But
just once,
yeah,
because the
okay. Oh,
donor
she did one.
required
Okay. Yeah,
because the
but she
donor
went.
required it.
Yeah, that's also shows flexibility. But the exciting thing is that she went from like, I don't know about this, to like, wow, this is a great way to get to know the people in our congregation, even the ones I already know, but to get them knowing better, to the extent that like maybe it was a year after your campaign was finished, Hannah and Rabbi Schwartzman were together at the front of a room for the annual or the every
For
other
the
year,
URJ biennial.
the
Yeah,
URJ
yeah.
conference, talking about how great it was to run this campaign. So
That's
that was
true.
very exciting for us.
So I will say that this could either reassure you or scare you, but even for people of great depth and thought in large congregations, it is not always easy to come up with, to pull out the vision because of the very things that Peter said. And yet, with help and with purpose, it's there. It just, the time, they have to be given some time to do it. And the campaign gives a lovely reason and an urgency for we must think about this, because how are we going to raise $16 million if people just think it's for brick and mortar? It's really for our future. So it was really, really great to do that. And what you were saying, Kate, about some of our strategies, the gatherings were like quintessential, but to bring it kind of home, because we found we were getting some lovely $500 and $1,000 and $2,000 gifts, but to bring it home, our feelings and whatever about how we were going to honor and recognize some of the gifts was we wanted not a regular kind of donor wall, but a piece of sculpture, a piece of public art that would be the donor wall. And we had a lot of ideas, and it turns out to make script go flowing is not so easy. But instead, we came up with that beautiful donor wall that you showed at the beginning. And we said all gifts of $10,000 or more you will be on this donor wall sculpture. And it was so enticing to people that we had quite a few people up their gift from 1,000 or 2,000 to 10,000. Of course, we gave them a couple of years to pay that off, but it was amazing. And of course, we put the people who gave more than that on there. But it was just a lovely. It was a goal. It was a kind of a physical object they could imagine themselves on, but it didn't look like a regular donor wall. So it was kind of. It made them say, what is that? I'm interested. So that was another strategy in the sort of last 6 to 8 months of the campaign to bring that home.
And it really
as with
is so
every successful campaign. So first of all, Hannah and her synagogue are in Falls Church, right outside of DC, and our company's in New York. So I was leading this project at the time. So every month, we would do a lot of remote collaboration, but every month I would get on Amtrak and spend a couple of days down there, and we would go into one of the conference rooms and, write a lot of things on the whiteboard about like, okay, here's where we're at now. How do we rejigger things for where we need to go? Because a campaign is always flexible and always changing. And I think that's one of the most important things to keep in mind is that that's continually going to happen.
Yeah, you can't take your eye off the ball. And that's another reason that you need to have someone working with you. I would say this for any institution or organization who, obviously you need to get along with them and trust them, but you have to feel that they are constantly thinking with you and reacting with you to changing circumstances. You can't lay out a 2-year plan and do it because you can lay it out, you have to lay it out, but then by the 3rd month, you're already making some changes and rejiggering and new elements or, whatever. So it was a living, breathing thing, even after it was over. So,
yeah. And thank you, Hannah. The one final thing I want to say about that, Kate, is that a lot of that recalibrating, as with every campaign, Hannah went back to early donors for additional gifts, right? It's like whether internally we were excited about the first level of their gift or disappointed, sometimes that was a factor, but regardless, the people who cared most and had the capacity, we went back to, and there was one, Hannah, your co-chair family, I think they walked in one day with like, here's another $250,000 to get us.
What they said was, out of their own blue, as we were in the last month, we wanted to increase the number of donors, as well as get more money near the end. And they said, we'll match 2-for-1, up to $250,000, 2-for-1, every new gift, every new person who pledges. And I was like, okay. And we got there 250, and other people stepped up to the plate. So that really brought it home, the last $500,000 in the last month.
Yeah, we could probably have a whole nother webinar on strategies for challenge matches
Yeah.
at synagogues and
all
elsewhere, because there's
different.
a lot of different things you can do there.
100%. Well, I want to ask Hannah one more question before we open it up to the questions that our participants are adding to the chat. Everyone, please do, if you haven't asked a question, you have one, please drop it in the chat. But while you're doing that, Hannah, I'd love for our listeners to hear what you shared with me back when we first had lunch together. What was the impact of the campaign on Temple Rodef Shalom and its community, and how are you still experiencing that now?
I mean, even I didn't understand that until we were deep into it, that it changed us, and it changed, I mean, in many ways, the way we see ourselves, how we see ourselves as a capable and thriving institution, the way the broader community sees us, and sometimes they think we're super wealthy. Well, we're not super wealthy. We just worked really hard together to make this happen. And the way our members see themselves within the Temple community, that they're like part of something, and people who might not have known very many people knew a few more and felt that they had a connection, and making the contribution of money made people feel like they were part of the success that was coming. And within a year of completing our campaign, the pandemic hit. And I really felt so strongly, and we felt very strongly about keeping our community together during that time. But I'm very sure that the campaign, what we achieved in the campaign, in terms of community building and knitting and connection, served us very well during the time that we were shut and closed. And we did Zoom, we did all kinds of stuff, but people felt connected already. And we kind of, I won't say seamlessly, no one did anything seamlessly in 2020, but we brought people in on Zoom and in e-letters and various things. And it was helped by the fact that they felt so vested together in this sense of community we had built over the 3 years that from when we started thinking about the campaign and talking to people.
And they had real, tangible, new and improved, bigger space that people could walk through, after the pandemic, that they could experience like what they all did together. And it wasn't simply that, even if a few families can make any campaign successful, it's always better if you get them plus more of your community together, because then everybody feels invested in this future.
Amazing. Thank you both very much. I'm going to check the chat for some questions. We have a couple of great ones. One that often comes up that I just wanted to give you a chance to speak to is, how do you run a capital campaign without taking away from annual giving?
Should I answer that?
Yeah, you go answer it, Peter.
Okay, because Hannah had a pretty unique situation, because they didn't do much of an annual fund. So let's not talk about Temple Rodef Shalom in that particular situation. And the easiest answer is that you always want to solicit and talk to your donors about their campaign gift alongside their annual fund gift. So if they're giving $500 to your annual fund and you want them to give $5,000 to your campaign, it's additive. It's like, over a 5-year period, can you do whatever you're doing for the annual fund plus this other thing? And we find that if it's done well, you're actually going to set yourself up for more money. And then annual fund gifts can be even larger when the campaign is over.
And I would say that for synagogues or situations where we are often some people's annual contribution is their membership contribution, which is also a charitable gift. Even if you say you this is the minimum you need to give, that's still a charitable gift. I made it very clear to people when they started wanting to say, okay, I'm going to cut my membership for a few years and I can give you more. And I said, oh no, I've promised the treasurer, the leadership, that we will not cannibalize our membership to do this. This is, and people's gifts to a campaign really for anybody who has any kind of who have resources and assets that are not just their annual income. That's really where you're hoping to draw some of their large gifts from. And so most people's annual membership in a congregation or anything comes out of their annual income, unless they're already retired or whatever. So I think that I was very clear, and I only had one or two people who violated that later. And so we were able to keep up the flow. And in the long run, as Peter said, they actually feel more committed, and we have a fair share membership model. So people self-assess and need to self-assess. And I think a lot of people felt the draw and felt more committed to us afterwards.
Great. A couple of more tactical questions. Out of the 16 million, what was the total of the seven-figure gifts, and what was your participation percentage of families?
I think that our participation of families, out of the 1,600 families, we had, I want to say 1,100 donors.
Yeah,
so
that sounds right to me.
Quite a good. We were happy with that. Once we passed 1,000, we were very happy. I'm trying to remember. So let's say not quite
I'd
half.
say around 7 to 8.
Yeah. So
7 to 8
half
million
came from
the
five donors.
Yep. Great. Which is typical, that's what we want to see in a campaign. Sometimes even larger percentage, it depends on the makeup of your base, but that made a lot of sense for you all. Going back to the study, there were a couple of questions. Peter, I'm going to kick this to you, and we're going to be brief about all of this because we have a few more to get to. Can I do an engineering study at the same time as a planning study, or should the engineering study happen first? And then talking a bit about how to identify participants in the planning study, if that was all congregation members or other community members.
Yeah. So, if you can do the engineering study first, but you definitely want to at least know the parameters of your architectural plan. The engineering study sounds a little more detailed than you might need to do a plan. Hannah.
I think you got to do the engineering study. I'll tell you why. Maybe you can do them concurrently, but I will tell you that one major donor in particular, really, every place has one. It's like, when did you last do your engineering study, and what about the physical plant, and how will you repair? I mean, you got to show that you've done it. It doesn't have to be immediate. Maybe you did one 3 years ago. That's fine. But if you haven't done one for 10 years, I would get started and say it's in process, and we're already seeing the results or whatever. I just think that you don't approach someone for $1 million about a building if you don't know what state your building's in.
What she said. And what was the other thing, Kate?
How do you identify the participants in the planning study? And were they all congregation members?
For a synagogue, it's really unlikely you're going to have people who are not members, or, very closely associated parents of members or something like that. Or in Hannah's case, they had $1 million gift from somebody who no longer lived there but kept their membership, sort of distant. So I wouldn't be looking for non-members unless there's a really strong argument for that. And you don't want people, regardless of whether you're a synagogue or any kind of organization, you don't want people who simply are going to give you their opinion and are not in a position to also give you their money. That's because a campaign is about money. So there are other situations where it's really important to get people who have opinions and are well placed in a community to give opinions about other things. Um, we don't want to be negative about any of those people, but we need to raise money, so we want to talk to the people who are in a position to give money.
Amazing. There are more questions, but we are out of time. So I'm going to pause there and say thanks everyone who joined us today and for these wonderful questions. We will follow up with some responses in the next couple of days to those who the questions we couldn't get to. We hope that Temple Rodef Shalom's story shows how a campaign can transform not only your operations or your building, but also your organization and its approach to fundraising. If you would like to explore how we might support you, we'd love to hear from you. You can see our information here, hellerfundraisinggroup.com, or reach out to us directly. Hannah, thank you for your continued partnership with us. Peter, always awesome to see you. On behalf of both Peter, Hannah, and our whole Heller Group team, thanks again for being here with us, and we will see you next time. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everyone.
That was
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So
everybody.
fun.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks,
Bye
Kate.
bye. Have fun.